Hello guys, Charles here and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to give you a few interpretations of a very simple but common chord progression. Now just because something's simple of course doesn't mean it's easy, and I want to show you a couple of possible interpretations of this chord movement. By that I mean some chord substitutions and the effect that that interpretation would have on motivic development. Lots of different players interpret the same chord progression in very different ways. A good example of that is that apparently Alan Holdsworth always liked to relate things to their closest minor scale, whereas people who have studied from a more kind of academic music system often like to relate things using like the mode system, which relates things to their nearest parent scale, very often a major scale. So we just want to figure out what works best for your brain. You might not have a preference and you can just think of these as different ways of creating more material out of smaller ideas. So let's get straight into it. So the simple progression we're going to be looking at is going from a major chord to a minor chord on the same root. So let's do all these in C today. So we could be going from a C major 7 to a C minor 7, or a C6 to a C minor 7, or a C6 to a C minor 6. Some variation on those, but we're going from a major tonality to a minor tonality, both sharing the same root. So the first way that we can interpret this is to simply play a C major scale and then a C minor scale. So we could have a little motif like this. And so we can take C major into a C minor sound well by simply flattening the 3rd and the 7th degree, and that gives us that movement. Now that interpretation might be your favourite, that might work best for you, but there's quite a few other ways that we could interpret this chord movement. So the first way we could rethink this is relative majors. So we've got C major, so we're just going to be playing C major ideas over C major. But when we get to C minor, we could think of it by its relative major, which is E flat major. So we could have C major going to E flat major. That would be the chord substitution, which is very similar to going to the minor. And so we can do the same thing with our melodic content. Whatever we played on C major, we can go up to E flat and play the same idea. Something like that. So that's just transposing the motif. Now personally, I quite like thinking of it that way, where we move from a major to a major, and we can literally just take the same idea or a very similar idea and transpose it up a minor 3rd. So that's going from C major to C minor, but thinking of it as C major to E flat major. Now we can flip that idea on its head, and instead of thinking C major, E flat major, we might prefer to think of both as minor. So we could have C major thinking of it as A minor, then up a minor 3rd to C minor. So instead of C major to C minor, we could think of it as A minor, which is the relative minor, to C minor. That sort of sound. So that's nice because it means we can use our minor pentatonic stuff. Now for a guitarist, obviously that's a dream scenario, so we can just muck around with our pentatonics wherever possible. So that's another way of interpreting this. Whenever you see C major 7 in this instance, but whenever you see that major chord, interpret it as if it were like a 6 chord, and that gives us the relative minor sound. So C6 is exactly the same as A minor 7. So another way we could choose to interpret this same chord progression is very often, and it would be context dependent, you'd have to look at the tune, but very often that minor chord is a 2. We go from a major chord to a minor chord, and then it's taking us through a 2-5-1 very often. So we'd have major, minor, that sort of idea. So because we can think of it as a 2, and we've talked in the past about how to handle 2 5s, we can treat this C minor in this instance as an F7. Now, why does that work? Well, again, if we think of this C minor after the C major, we've got C major, C minor, and we're interpreting this as a 2. Well, the 5 of that 2 would be F7, a 2-5 into B flat. And we know that on a 2 chord, we can treat the 2 and the 5 both as just a 5. So essentially, we're going from a C major 7 to an F7, but with a C in the bass. Which is basically just a C minor 6 sound with a sus in it. So with the motif, we can go something C major-y to something F7-y. I'm just outlining arpeggios there. We could, though, just transpose the idea again into an F area of the guitar. So I'm literally changing position here because it makes it visually clearer, but I can go up to F7. And I've just got to flatten the 7 still. But I'm basically moving that same idea. Or I could do that same idea but in position. Something along those lines. So just to wrap all those up, I've got 4 different interpretations there of a 2 chord progression. So it's just C major 7 to C minor 7. So we can think of it as simply C major 7 to C minor 7. And whatever we play on C major, we can simply flatten the 3rd and the 7th. And it's going to sound great. The second approach was to think of it as C major 7 to E flat major 7. We're giving that C minor an interpretation of its relative major, E flat in this instance. So whatever we play on the C major 7, we can now transpose into E flat. That's going to sound really nice. Now we flipped that on its head and we said, well, let's interpret both as minor. So C major 7 becomes A minor 7. So A minor 7 to C minor 7. So this one was nice because this is pentatonic language. All that nice stuff. And then finally we thought, well, in some contexts, that minor chord is going to be functioning as a 2. So what we can do if it's a 2 is treat it as a 5. In this instance, that's going to be C major 7 to C minor becomes C major 7 to F7 of some sort, eventually taking us to B flat. So in that instance, we can interpret it as a major sound, go into a dominant sound, however you want to interpret that. So I hope you found that one useful, guys. So that was a really focused conversation we've just had there, but the point is about how you choose to interpret the chord symbols. I chose 2 really simple chords, simply moving from a major to a minor. And you see we've got plenty of different ways that we can choose to interpret that. What's the point? Well, the point is that you want to find the one that best works for you. And you may find some contexts, some chord progressions you choose to interpret one way, and others you choose to interpret a completely different way. But the important thing is that you really focus in and you try and make it as easy for yourself as possible. By doing that, you're always going to find that you've got more ideas to play than you thought you did. If you see a really niche chord type, a really specific chord type, it can be very worrying and think, oh, I don't have any licks or anything in that chord. If you can interpret it as something else, suddenly we think, oh, brilliant, well, I've got loads of ideas that I know I can play on that. Yet another interpretation of that minor chord that we talked about today was, for example, if we talked about it as a C minor 6, that's essentially an A minor 7 flat 5. And so if we don't know any stuff to play on a minor 6 chord, which actually you don't see a huge amount in the real book, a minor 6 chord. You see it frequently, but it's not in every tune. But you might still have lots of minor 7 flat 5 content, and you can play that in its place. So just knowing that and knowing that that's a comfortable way for you to read these tunes, so that when you see a minor 6 chord, your brain instinctively thinks minor 7 flat 5, or whatever the interpretation is that works best for you. If you found that one useful, please do give this video a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and share with any of your friends who might also benefit from this discussion. Please leave me a comment down below letting me know what else you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I hope you're all doing very well, getting plenty of practice in, and I very much look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers!
Roll up, let me embed a story you'll never forget. A drip, drip, you're drowning in debt now. You can't buy your way out. And I heard you find it difficult to cope. Well, here by this bottle full of hope and limited.